Friday trade, watching Wall Street from his perch at World Headquarters in New York. We couldn't do the program without him, as we bring you news every day here, live from Washington, in many cases, market-moving news. It's a little bit more abstract in the case of Lisa Cook, but Wall Street is watching. The bond market certainly is. The judge did not indicate which way she was leaning in this emergency hearing today that started at 10 a.m. It concluded with no ruling, as the judge peppered lawyers for both sides, Lisa Cook and the administration, about 2 hours today without ruling on the Fed governor's request for a temporary order blocking her ouster. We're going to talk about this with the panel, along with the greater view on what the administration is trying to accomplish here. Beyond Lisa Cook herself, the firings that we've seen at the head of the CDC, BLS, and other agencies that the president is clearly shaping in his own vision. Something we talked about with Donald Ayer, the former Deputy Solicitor General, former Deputy Attorney General, joined us in studio today to express his concerns about the changes that he fears in some cases could be irreversible. Listen to what Ayer said.
What's far more important than any one of these situations is the pattern that's clearly emerged since the inauguration, which is a pattern of Donald Trump, in one instance after another, working to essentially overthrow the norms, procedures, checks of our process. And that's the real concern that we should all have.
We play it to the panel on our Friday edition. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis and Jeanne Zaino are with us. Rick is Republican strategist and partner at Stone Court Capital. Jeanne, of course, democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School. Ash Center, our Democratic analyst. Always wonderful to have both of you with us here. Rick, do you see it as Donald Ayer does, a test of the system? We certainly see Donald Trump trying to exercise the limits of his power as an executive. But is it a cause for concern?
Well, I think that anybody who is used to the sort of standard checks and balances that have existed, throughout the modern presidency would be concerned about the emergence of Donald Trump and sort of his unitary executive theory that is clearly being implemented in virtually every one of these instances. And certainly, his test to see if he can fire Lisa Cook, is a exercise of the concept that the Article 2 in the Constitution says the president has sole power to govern the executive branch, and he is testing every aspect of that in the first 9 months of office. And so in the extreme, a unitary theory like this could diminish the roles of the checks and balances in both the legal and the congressional side. So, yeah, it's something to keep an eye on, because it's definitely a different approach to governance than we've seen really in our lifetimes.
He had 4 years to think about this, Jeanne, and a lot of people around him to help him succeed in these goals of pushing the lines of authority from the Oval Office. If you're a Trump supporter, this is all up. You're making America great again, but You've thrown down a number of flags and issued a number of warnings about the checks and balances that Rick Davis refers to. If they go away, can you ever get them back?
Well, we would hope so, but I think, challenging, legally challenging in court is not the problem. It's a lot. Mm-hmm. It's a lot for you to cover every day. It's a lot for all of us to watch. What is most concerning to me, though, is the fact that not just the president challenging his power if he does so and he listens to the rulings by judges, the fact that he is trying to upend any sense of agreement on what is truth. There's an old saying which says that when you don't adhere to or listen to facts, you abandon your freedom, because there's no way to fight back if we don't have an agreed upon fact, language, evidence-based understanding. And that, to me, is the most troubling aspect of what we've seen, whether it's the Bureau of Labor Statistics, whether it is, the issue involving the Fed. it's startling to me that J.D. Vance went out yesterday in an exclusive interview with another outlet and said that it doesn't really matter if what Lisa Cook did is illegal or not. What matters is she is not serving the president. And of course, that's not what matters here. You've got to follow due process, and we have to have an agreed upon understanding of facts in order to make policy in this country going forward. So that to me is the most troubling component. And the president has been pushing those boundaries in a way we've never seen before in the US, but we have certainly seen elsewhere.
You wonder if the checks and balances will be restored in Congress, Rick. So far, it really just has been the courts pushing back on this administration. But Bill Cassidy has been doing some hard thinking here when it comes to the CDC and the changes that have taken place there just in the last 24 hours. The CDC director was fired. 4 leaders in the agency resigned in protest. And yesterday we saw the rank and file walk out and hold a protest on the streets in front of the agency here. Senator Bill Cassidy got a promise from RFK Jr. that this type of thing would not happen and that vaccine policy would not be impacted by his personal beliefs. Now Cassidy says it's time to cancel the vaccine advisory meeting that's set for September, and that the Health Committee must provide oversight when it comes to these positions, either being fired or vacated through resignation. Is the Senate about to stand up here, Rick?
You know, it's hard to tell. They have not to date. Speaking of exercising their powers of the Constitution, advise and consent on these presidential appointments is one of the most powerful aspects of their legislative authority. And, you know, in almost every instance of the most controversial members of the Trump cabinet, they were able to become appointed by a tie-breaking vote by the vice president. And so there were not enough senators to stand up and say to Tulsi Gabbard, to JFK Jr., this is a no. And so they've kind of abdicated that most important role to hold the executive branch's feet to the fire, you know, when appointing individuals to high office. So it makes sense that Cassidy's going to want to understand what direction this administration is going on vaccine policy before they implement it. That is the proper role of oversight. I would not be surprised if they stiff him and say, we're going forward with this committee and we're going to implement the rules to make America healthy again.
Wow. Well, RFK Jr. in a memo to staff, Jeanne writes, reform does not diminish your work, it strengthens it. Is he right?
There's nothing wrong with reform. The problem is that he apparently, if we are to believe the reports that are coming out, is not listening to, taking the advice of, even meeting with those experts in the CDC who have the knowledge to advise him properly. So I am really curious to see what this report comes out on autism and the connection between autism and vaccinations, which has been widely discredited, obviously. And we heard just the other day in the cabinet meeting, the secretary promising President Trump, who has also expressed belief in that connection, unfounded as it is, that report was coming, and a lot of speculation that the director of the CDC was removed because she was pushing back on that. And again, we don't know. But, you know, the secretary is talking about reform. We welcome reform. The CDC needs reform. But you simply cannot lose all the knowledge in an institution and then reform it properly, bringing in people who have no expertise, in this case, in science or medicine.
We heard from Dimitri Daskalakis. He's been doing some interviews, Rick. This is the director of National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases who quit. He resigned yesterday, and his resignation letter made the rounds. We were talking about that. He did an interview with The Atlantic and said no one from his center had ever been allowed to brief the secretary, RFK Jr. Quote, I'm not sure where he's getting his information other than Substacks that are erroneous, unquote. What's going on inside of the HHS?
Well, this was the motivation behind Senator Cassidy and his questions of Secretary Kennedy before he was willing to give him a vote on his nomination is, put a rein on this issue of attacking the vaccine policy of the that exists today. And he got a commitment, and that commitment didn't last 9 months. So I think that there's a lot of realization in the Republican caucus of the United States Senate that they are a party to this kind of dismantling of government. Jeanne's right. You can reform an agency without losing its expertise. Virtually every administration puts its stamp on it like that. But then to drive very talented people out and replace them with folks who have no basic experience in the subject matter of the agency is not going to build confidence with the American public. And again, we started this segment, earlier this hour talking about whether or not Donald Trump has the potential of overreach and losing the confidence of the American people. And I would say issues like this tend to drive you in that direction.
This is quite a moment we're in. Next Thursday, by the way, will be the hearing, Senate Finance Committee hearing for RFK Jr.'s testimony, and there are going to be some tough questions, I'm sure. Many thanks to our great panel on the Friday edition, Rick Davis and Jeanne Zaino, Bloomberg Politics contributors. I hope you both have a long weekend, and we'll see you back here on the Tuesday edition, not to mention the late edition later on this evening. I'm Mathieu in Washington. Stay with us. We have more to cover here on the fastest show in politics. This is Balance